Welcome to Fantasy Football Today, Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, joined today for the third or fourth time, Jeff Bell from Football Guys. Always a good time to have you on the show. Jeff, tell everybody what you've been working on and what you've got coming up.
Yeah, so we are deep into rookie season here at Football Guys. We have, as we're recording this today, the Shrine Bowl is tonight. We have Senior Bowl week coming up, and those practices are going to get started. We're working on our rookie guide that we've released the last handful of years at Football Guys. So especially in the Dynasty universe, but as we get into the playoffs here at Football Guys, we are very focused on rookies and getting that out.
You guys know that I come from the Football Guys world, and I will have Football Guys on the show throughout rookie draft prep season. Go check out that resource. You guys do a fantastic job with it. I always learn something from it. I'll be anxiously awaiting the first and second and third and however many releases you guys have this year. On today's show, though, it's not about the rookies. We're talking about playoff ranking risers and fallers. Sam Darnold, of course, Travis Hunter, Colston Loveland, and more. We always start with 3 questions for our guests, and thank you for correcting the year that I had, so I didn't just read the wrong thing, Jeff. But it was the 2025 rookie running back class that I think probably last year I talked to you, and we were both extremely excited about it. Was it a disappointment?
I hesitate to say it was a disappointment. I know that the where Ashton Genty was going in redrafts, he didn't quite get to that, but at the same time, he did things that very, very rare of what he accomplished as a rookie running back, especially the addition of the receiving game there. Obviously, Hampton dealt with injuries, and Quinshon Judkins dealing with injuries as well. We saw flashes. We know these guys are good. And I think that's the biggest takeaway on this. We were right. We know that they're good. They didn't get there in year one of the fantasy ceilings that we were hoping for. So I can understand some trepidation, some concern there. But at the same time, we did get affirmation that we feel pretty good. Marion Hampton's a good player. Travian Henderson is a good player. Quinshon Judkins was very productive dealing with injury now. And we saw flashes from some deeper players like Michelle Tootin from Sampson in Cleveland, seeing some of these deeper flashes as well. So I hesitate to go outright disappointment. I think maybe our eye line might have been a little bit too high on immediate production because we have seen some rookies come in for immediate production. But I think historically, you stack up what they did against a historic rookie running back, they probably were pretty in line on the high end of that.
Yeah, I think you nailed it with. And I always kind of say this, like we talk about busts at the end of the year, and was it that guy's fault or was it our fault for expecting too much? And we may have expected a little bit too much, and it may be an opportunity to go buy some of these rookies a little bit lower than you could have last offseason, this offseason, particularly a couple of rookies we'll talk about later who are potential playoff fallers. One of the things I've talked about the last couple of weeks is I think the market may be undervaluing some of these maybe starters, because when I look around the league, I think there are more openings than there are good quarterbacks, and there aren't enough rookies coming in to take these jobs. With that in mind, are you buying or selling Malik Willis going into free agency?
I'm buying just because I think there are a couple different factors here. One, we know that it's a copycat league, and we know that Sam Darnold is a win away from being the Super Bowl champion quarterback. And Sam Darnold is kind of the picture for we had Baker Mayfield, then we had Sam Darnold, and now some of these quarterbacks that had a higher pedigree and didn't really work out in the first spot, getting another opportunity. I think another angle that is really interesting, particularly to Malik Willis, is Jeff Hafley getting that job down in Miami. And that's a coach that knows Malik Willis very, very well. That's an opportunity there with whatever they're going to end up doing at quarterback. That there you can paint the picture that Hafley says, I know Willis, and I want to bring him in here to run this offense with some explosive pieces there. So that kind of gives you at least one angle. As you start to look around, there should be openings for jobs. We obviously at the end of last year, where some of these teams were in the quarterback position was really, really rough. I think the other angle that's a reason to buy Malik Willis, we see Dante Moore going back to Oregon. We know we have Fernando Mendoza coming up in this rookie class. Other than that, Ty Simpson's likely to get drafted in the first round-ish or so, we think. But really kind of that lack of these feel-good rookie quarterbacks. This isn't the class from a couple of years ago. We had 6 guys that went in the top 15 and took a lot of those starting jobs. I think there's going to be opportunity, and that's the biggest thing of why you would buy a Malik Willis in Dynasty for that potential opportunity. It should be available somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to buy starting quarterbacks in Dynasty for anything less than a first. And we have some guys, Willis, Jacoby Brissett, maybe Kyler and Tua, who are much cheaper than that right now. And the second we find out who they're starting for, they won't be anymore. So it could be a really good opportunity there. Emma doing a fantastic job in the chat. She asked you guys to hit the like button. I would as well. Also, we are going to be answering some chat questions at the end of the show. So get some questions in if you have them. Question number 3, does the hiring of Drew Petzing matter for Sam Laporta's dynasty value?
I mean, if people are saying it matters for Sam Laporta's dynasty value, then I think for his dynasty value, it matters. A lot of mouths to feed in that offense. We know Amon-Ra St. Brown. Really, hypothetically, if you're looking at where Arizona's offense functioned with Trey McBride, it's kind of the area of the field that Amon-Ra St. Brown operates in. So that kind of, you can see a lot of those targets, Trey McBride targets going to Amon-Ra St. Brown. You can see a lot of the Michael Wilson breakout targets or kind of the downfield stuff going to Jameson Williams. So I think in that regard, I would have some trepidation, especially with the injury. But Dynasty is, especially this point of the year in Dynasty, so much value is dependent on basically what people are saying the value is. And so if people are making that connection with Trey McBride and adding that to Sam Laporta, then I would say, yes, it does matter for his dynasty value. I don't know if it's going to matter for his production on the field.
Yeah, I think with Petzing coming from the Stefanski system and us seeing what Stefanski's done with the tight ends, and I know if Kyle Pitts goes back to Atlanta, everybody's going to be, not everybody, lots of people are going to be all the way back in on him with Kevin Stefanski. It's a debate that we have a lot in this time of year, but also in the spring, with how much does this offensive coordinator who did this thing before matter to these new guys he's playing with. And honestly, the results have been a little bit of a mixed bag. On occasion, it seems, yeah, this guy's philosophy really seemed to matter. I think the one thing that McBride got in Arizona that's a little bit unusual is they had a lot of times where he was just kind of the safety. Like, let's look at the deep shots, and then there's Trey McBride in the flats. And a lot of tight ends don't get those types of targets. We saw Fannin get those a little bit this year as well. David Njoku had a tight end 3 season basically based on those types of targets. So if those were there, at least helps Laporta's floor a little bit. Let's take our first break. When we come back, we'll get to playoff risers and fallers.
This is European soccer's biggest stage.
Written in the stars! What a difference she has made!
The question is, can you handle it? The crowd here feels electric. Stream every match of the UEFA Women's Champions League on Paramount+.
One thing I love about our audience is when the chat breaks news to me while I'm on a show. And yes, I went to Twitter and confirmed that Ian Rappaport has also just tweeted this 1 minute ago. So Jeff, this wasn't on the rundown. We'll get to playoff winners and losers in just a moment. But could there be a better guy to have on for a live reaction than you? Miguel in the chat says Joe Brady promoted to Bills head coach job. I don't know if you saw it or not, but about a week and a half ago, I made a snarky Chiefs tweet about how what I really thought the Bills should do was promote Joe Brady and leave him in charge of play calling. That was not nice of me, and I apologize. What's your instant reaction? Joe Brady's your head coach.
I mean, shock, probably a little bit. Like, I'm just like resetting here. I don't know.
Do you feel like you're on one of those shows where there's a hidden camera and you're being bumped?
Yeah, a little bit, Heath. Yeah, Joe Brady. I'm not in love with this move, to be honest. And you know, maybe hopefully this can be pulled for hot takes in the future or something. But I just don't love the move particularly. I think that they were in a tough spot with Josh Allen's age, because to just completely overhaul the offensive system as Josh Allen's going into an age 30 window, that might have been a little bit of an ask. So I can maybe understand leaning towards continuity. Just Joe Brady doesn't, I don't know. I'm just not there on Joe Brady. I think
it seems a little bit like Bills ownership has decided on the status quo without the guy who was the head coach. And I think most observers of football didn't think, like Sean McDermott, maybe he'd had his chances and maybe it was okay to let him go. But I don't think very many people thought he was the one thing that was the problem.
I think
And
the players were very
Yeah.
bought in on Sean McDermott. And I think it got to a point from everything that the fallout that we've heard from this past week in Buffalo, it sounded like the move from Sean McDermott really was a lot more about Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott were not on the same page. And they were basically looking about who's going to take the blame here. And I think overall, Brandon Beane and probably sold to Terry Pegula that, hey, we're on the right track here. We're on the right track. Like, we don't need a massive overhaul. But I think it got to the point where it just got uncomfortable between Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane. And basically they said one of these two guys has to go. We don't want to flip the apple cart upside down. We want to see what's in the market. We want to go out and talk to and get ideas from other places. But at the same time, we have been going deep in the playoffs, getting close. And so we don't think it needs a massive overhaul. I don't know.
I think the other thing was, and this has been under discussed maybe, but the fact that the Bills didn't fire their coach until after the playoffs had started kept them from talking to Kubiak. And that's the guy everybody wants. And so if you're a fan of a team that has not found a head coach yet, significantly that you get a chance at Kubiak, because I can't imagine there's anybody he'd rather coach than Josh Allen. And so that's interesting. I would say, like, strictly from a dynasty fantasy football perspective, this probably just does not mean much. It's good news for James Cook. Like, I would guess you're going to continue to see a very run heavy offense, and James Cook should continue to just be awesome because he is awesome. Other than that, I'm not sure that it really matters all that much for the Bills. Let's talk about the playoffs, risers and fallers. No risers and fallers from that recent breaking news, but it was awesome. Thank you, Miguel. Sam Darnold. Now, a lot of these guys didn't move a lot, and I think maybe philosophically speaking, we can talk about whether anyone should move a lot during the NFL playoffs. Sam Darnold, I did move up one spot from QB 25 to 24. Maybe he deserves to be just a little bit higher than that. It's such a strange profile because he's been awesome in the playoffs. And that was kind of the one doubt that we had left. Would an NFL team commit to him for a long time and think that he could actually do what he's done the last couple of weeks? From a fantasy perspective, he was like 100 points different in the past two seasons with the Vikings and with Seattle. And a lot of that had to do with pass volume. Now he might be losing his offensive coordinator, whether he wins the Super Bowl or not. Do you agree that Sam Darnold's been a winner the last couple of weeks? And do you think that he could give us another season, not like this past year, but 2 years ago?
I don't know that I'm there on 2 years ago, just because of the structure of what Seattle wants to do. I don't think Seattle has any interest in playing the way that the Vikings were playing 2 years ago. And we know, as good as Jackson Smith and Jigba is, it's not Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and in shootout games and not having this defense is phenomenal for Seattle. The run game is very, very strong. And so you, at some point, teams are telling you what they want to do, and that's how they want to win with Sam Darnold. I think that he's a riser just in the terms of we feel a lot better about him being the starter now at this point and having that great year last year. But the way that, and so much of the way going into the offseason, it comes down to the last impression. All the last impression of Sam Darnold falling apart against having a tough game against the Lions and then a terrible game against the Rams. And we just kind of flushed his entire good season away. I know in Dynasty, everybody was ready for Jalen Milroe to come in and be the starting quarterback for the Hawks. And I don't know that that's going to happen anytime soon. So I think from that regard, last impressions are really, really strong on Sam Darnold. So he's a riser, and especially if he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback, that's a lot of job security probably that you would think. But I don't expect that offensive system to change dramatically, even if Clint Kubiak were to be hired somewhere else, just because they've told you the way they want to win football games, and kind of you have to believe them.
So one of the guys that I have right in that same range, actually two of the guys, I'll just ask you these three quarterbacks and what order you would rank them in. I've got it Kyler Murray, then Tyler Shuck, then Sam Darnold. And you couldn't have three different quarterbacks in terms of potential outlook. I feel pretty good about Shuck starting next year. Kyler has much more upside than the other two, but also I have no idea if he's going to get to start next year. And then Darnold's just Darnold. How would you rank those three?
Yeah, I'm in a very, very similar tier there, and looking at the same window. I have Sam Darnold slightly ahead and Tyler Shuck next and Kyler Murray next. And I think that if you're just looking from a fantasy point potential, then Kyler Murray should be number one there. I think Kyler Murray has the highest upside in terms of fantasy points. At some level, when we're talking about this tier of quarterback, you're weighing job security, you're looking at the future. There's a lot of different factors that are coming in on. I know for me personally, I had a bunch of dynasty teams that I had like CJ Stroud and Kyler Murray and was feeling good like 2 years ago, and Tua Tagovailoa being in that mix and feeling really good 2 years ago in Superflex leagues to have like those three players. And now it's like, oh man, am I in trouble? Like, what am I going to do here? And so I think Murray, it's kind of walking that gap between, does he ends up in Justin Fields territory? Does he ends up where if he moves to a new team, or if he's the Cardinals quarterback one more year, and is this the last chance? Does it change that eye line on him being viewed as a starting quarterback in the NFL versus, I mean, Shuck is obviously moving in one direction, but historically it seems like these day two quarterbacks that have strong rookie years, you're probably better off selling them than really buying in on them, because like I mentioned CJ Stroud, but Davis Mills a couple of years ago was feeling off his rookie year. We were feeling, hey, he had a pretty solid year. And then immediately they come and replace him. More often than not, I don't think Tyler Shuck is there at all in terms of being replaced in the near term. I think longer term teams have a little bit more of an appetite to do that flip earlier than it being even a first round quarterback. And Darnold, again, I mean, we're verge of Sam Darnold starting in the Super Bowl, and Sam Darnold is starting in the Super Bowl before Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield started in the Super Bowl. So that's just wild.
It absolutely is. And I think somebody said the other day that Sam Darnold's actually a little bit younger than Josh Allen, which also, I mean, it seems like Sam Darnold aged 10 years while he was with the Jets, but that will do that to a lot of guys. Let's go to the second playoff riser I had. It's Colston Loveland. And you mentioned when I was talking to the Mats, I think one of them said that they just kept him at tight end 3 the whole time. And I kept him above consensus, but I had dropped him a little bit during the middle of the season, because honestly, if you forget about the progression of this happening in week 18 and then in the playoffs, it mostly was that Colston Loveland broke out when Rome Odunze was not available. That breakout was so pronounced, though, and he validated everything that Colston Loveland backers believed about him during that stretch. Are you just wheels up? Colston Loveland's going to be a top 5 tight end next year?
Yeah, he's my tight end 3 in Dynasty too. Yeah. So I think this is the right spot to hold him in, and there's just a lot in his favor in terms of seeing the way that the NFL is moving towards 2 tight end sets, and having Cole Kmet there to do some of that dirty work to be able to free up Colston Loveland to be really, he's a slot receiver for the Bears. And I think we started off talking about Trey McBride, and that's what we're looking for right now in the landscape, is these tight ends that are really just the slot receivers for their teams. And Loveland is very much that. We see Luther Burden coming in and coming on, and the profile of Burden, you would think a slot receiver, but they're using him a lot more in the vertical game. I think Rome Odunze probably in the vertical game as well. So that's where there's just a lot of volume for Loveland underneath there in that Ben Johnson scheme, having another strong tight end with Cole Kmet to do the dirty work of a tight end and not being put on there, and then really just projecting out. I mean, the future around DJ Moore, I think is uncertain to say the most there. It doesn't seem like he's overly long in Chicago. Ended the year on they really lost the game because he gave up on a route, more or less, and that was a player that Ben Johnson was not explicitly talking about, but kind of implicitly talking about in the offseason about effort, those types of things. That's been a little bit of a concern there throughout. So it wouldn't be surprising to see DJ Moore move out, having Luther Burden and Rome Odunze locked in those outside receiver spots, having Loveland really as that slot receiver with Kmet as the tight end to do the inline guy.
When you talk about Loveland at tight end 3, has he risen to the point to where he's in a different tier from Tyler Warren and Harold Fannin? Or are those guys close enough that if you can get plus with any of them, you'd be willing to make that deal? Like if somebody offers you Tyler Warren plus a second for Loveland, let's do that. Or somebody offers you Fannin plus a second, or is Loveland kind of separated from Warren and Fannin in your mind?
I don't think he's not separated to me. I've got Bowers and McBride pretty clearly above that group, but I do have them all sitting in the same tier with Loveland, Warren, Fannin. I think Sam Laporta is kind of at the back end of that tier, and I think Tucker Kraft merits mention in that tier too. And that's kind of where I'm sitting in that next group of tight ends. I think it's probably good practice in Dynasty to have those opportunities to be able to get either a late first or a second to tier down, because it ends up being so close in production so often, or like one guy ends up being better. And I think over the long term, if you're doing those little moves in Dynasty to continue to accrue those seconds, those late firsts, and really the opportunity to roll those up into another piece, I think you're going to win more often than not in Dynasty if you are being aggressive in that manner versus saying I want to pay to tier up to Colson Loveland over a Warren or a Fannin, who I have to give you some flowers. You were all about Fannin last year and you absolutely nailed it. That was a great call.
Thank you. We have a rule on this podcast that we have to say Harold Fannin's name every show. And so that portion of the show is completed. I think in that same idea of what you were talking about, that may exist in rookie drafts this year with the top 3 or 4, depending on how you evaluate the wide receivers, those really, really elite wide receivers in this class. If I have the second or the third pick and somebody's looking to get to the best of one of those guys and I can drop back and still get one of the other 3, I'm definitely going to be looking at that, because I don't really know which one of those 3 is going to be the best. Maybe I'll have a stronger opinion by the time we get to April. I think everybody was excited that Colston Loveland validated what we thought about him. The next riser, I'm not sure anybody was excited about it, but Ramondre Stevenson. Listen, speaking of giving somebody flowers, like with the way he started this season and our expectations, not universally, and maybe you were different, but that eventually Travion Henderson would be the clear best back in this backfield. And then what Ramondre did down the stretch and in the playoffs, and then finally in the AFC Championship game, just almost making Henderson irrelevant. I no longer look at, well, where's Ramondre Stevenson going to play in 2026? Or is Ramondre Stevenson just a handcuff in 2026? It almost feels like you have to expect him to be the starting running back next year. So he is up for me from RB 53 to RB 43 since the end of December.
Yeah, I've long maintained throughout this season that as we are expecting the Henderson takeover, I've kind of thrown out there that, the Patriots coaching staff likes Ramondre Stevenson a lot more than we do, and we have to recognize that.
Do you think that this is a situation where the rookie gets a full off season with the club and we see Henderson do next year what we thought he was going to do this year? Or do you think that we're just kind of safe viewing this as a true split committee and Stevenson's going to have standalone value next year as well?
I think it's going to be a split committee with Stevenson having standalone value. And we saw this game, the AFC Championship game, this past game, where that weather, they felt comfortable giving the ball to Stevenson because we know ball security was probably the primary factor in that game. Had either Stevenson or May or Henderson fumbled deep in territory, and that could have swung the game. And I think more than anything, more than them saying anything about Henderson, that ball security being a key component there. I mean, you're looking at Stevenson being the potential goal line back. I think recognizing the upside, certainly. And I mean, injuries happen. That creates opportunities for a player to be the bell cow in that situation. I think that we were wrong in the offseason on viewing this historically as that split Patriots backfield with a receiving back and a rushing back, because I think that thought failed to account for the difference between Tom Brady not being mobile in the slightest and also being able to read the defense quickly to get it out to James White versus Drake May being a very mobile quarterback and the ability to extend plays. I view it as a committee, but I don't view it as this guy's the receiving back, that guy's the rushing back. Right. I view it as kind of just maybe hot hand, move it through. And then when they do get a little bit tight right now, they just feel more comfortable with Stevenson making the right call and holding on to the ball.
So I've got 4 veteran backs kind of from 40 to 43. And I'll see if you think these guys are close and what order you would put them in. Chuba Hubbard, J.K. Dobbins, Tony Pollard, Ramondre Stevenson.
Chuba Hubbard, J.K. Dobbins, Tony Pollard, or Ramondre Stevenson. Given what we know right now, probably leaning towards Pollard being the front of that because he's kind of the lead back there in Tennessee. Right. Hubbard, just a lot of uncertainty around what Jonathan Brooks is going to be. They seem to be very high on Jonathan Brooks, his recovery there. So that probably knocks Hubbard maybe more towards the back. Ramondre Stevenson, let's put Ramondre Stevenson. I like the upside in the offense, so I put him behind Pollard. And then what was the fourth?
Dobbins was the last one?
Dobbins. Yeah. I mean, I think concern probably around
Right.
Dobbins on that injury and just knowing that injury. I think you could paint a very realistic picture of Dobbins stepping in above RJ Harvey next year, just because I
Right.
think there's some limitations in RJ Harvey's game, but just the trust level on Dobbins on do they really feel like they can trust him? Is it going to be Denver? Is it going to be somewhere else? I think the uncertainty around Dobbins forces him to the back.
Yeah, Stevenson is the oldest of that group, but they're all within about, I think, 18 months. Dobbins, it feels like, should be the oldest, and he's one of the younger in the group. Still going to be just 27 at the start of next year, but the knees are probably older than that. Just a quick side note, because he wasn't really for me, but with Stevenson holding on to this job, with him dominating in the playoffs, should Henderson be a faller?
To open up that conversation, you need to move players above him. And that's where when I saw this on the show sheet and looking at it, and I was like, well, I mean, in a vacuum, sure, you could argue, depending on where your team is, the James Cook or Jonathan Taylor being above Henderson. But at the same time, this is a 22-year-old running back that was shown just very, very high upside flashes as a rookie. We know he's a good player. And so to make somebody a faller, you've got to make somebody else a riser. And I just don't see that player to step above him.
The guys that I see behind him in my rankings right now that I could see being ahead of him in 6 months, the first one's pretty obvious. Breece Hall, I've got him right behind Henderson, and some people have him ahead of Henderson already. It's just where's he playing football next year? If he's still on the Jets, in that situation, I don't have much hope for at all. Then it's going to be hard for me to make that move. I think Quinshon Judkins, if he gets to 100% health and looks like the guy that he was, then he could easily move ahead of him. Maybe Bucky Irving, if he once again shows that he's as good as he looked his rookie year, could move ahead of him. I have those guys behind him right now, but not far enough to where it would really surprise me. I think it'd be harder for the older backs like Kyron and Jacobs to move ahead of Henderson unless Henderson fails more than he has. One last riser, and this guy's part of a group of wide receivers that could be moving all over the place in Jacksonville. But the one guy I'm certain on movement is that I was too low on Parker Washington. Really not just going to the playoffs, but going into the last month of the season. He looked like the best wide receiver on Jacksonville. It feels insane to say that, and nobody's going to rank him in Dynasty as the best wide receiver on Jacksonville. But I've moved him from wide receiver 50 up to wide receiver 41. Does Parker Washington actually have the ceiling to do what he did in the last 6 weeks over a full season?
There does not feel like there is a piece that needs to be moved in Jacksonville. And to me, it feels like Brian Thomas is maybe that piece that needs to be moved that would grant a whole lot of clarity around that receiver room. We saw them make that move for Jacoby Myers and then give him the extension. We know Jacoby Myers is going to be there. Parker Washington, you get the sense with Liam Cohen that he wasn't sold on Parker Washington early in the year, and Parker Washington really established himself within Liam Cohen's eyes. And then I'm still seeing, I just saw a story yesterday that somebody was saying that Travis Hunter being a full-time offensive player, and it's like, well, geez, if you're viewing Travis Hunter as a full-time offensive player, you've extended Jacoby Myers, and Parker Washington's probably not going to disappear, then to me that says Brian Thomas probably isn't a Jacksonville Jaguar. And I think you're right on putting Washington as a riser, and I think it's a really good talking point to go out and say maybe target this guy, because we do see the movement. You're really setting yourself up pretty well if that shoe does fall, that they were to move on from Brian Thomas, and then Parker Washington would obviously be a massive, massive riser. And so getting ahead of the market, I think, is a sharp dynasty play there. And yeah, just the production's undeniable now at this point. We saw Washington, this is 2 years in a row now where he was really, really strong to end the year. At some point, you're going to allow that to begin the year too.
Yeah, and we will talk about Travis Hunter right after the break, because I think he is the guy that if Brian Thomas Jr. is not moved, well, we'll talk about that more in just a moment. I just wanted to offer an olive branch to my Bills fan friend, because I didn't just make a sarcastic comment about Joe Brady a month ago. I think a month ago, I also suggested that the Bills should be offering a couple of seconds to go get Brian Thomas Jr., because I would love to see him with Josh Allen. I haven't really lowered him as much as most people have. I'm still a big believer in the talent. He was not healthy for a large portion of this season. I think there were some other things going on behind the scenes. But I think if he gets into a place that's better suited for him, we could still see Brian Thomas Jr. be an elite wide receiver. Let's take that second break and we'll talk about some playoff fallers.
Critics agree Landman is a hit.
We roll the dice one last time.
Men die. Oil companies don't.
So as of right now, I'm basically just acknowledging the egg on my face for believing that Travis Hunter was too talented of a player and he's just definitely going to be a star wide receiver. I hope that a year from now, I'm saying, man, I wish I hadn't had those 3 months where I downgraded Travis Hunter. But you mentioned it. There's been talk from Jacksonville that Travis Hunter is still going to play a lot of offense. There's also been talk from the general manager that, listen, as the team looks right now, it sure looks more like we need corners than we do wide receivers. So he might have to play there more there. I had him at wide receiver 18 about a month ago. I've got him at wide receiver 28. And that's, as you know, that range of wide receivers, it's not hard to move 10 spots. We still have a lot of young, very talented wide receivers. I'm just feeling it's almost like the Justin Fields situation a year or two ago in Dynasty, where you could rank a guy based on how elite his upside is, and I still believe Hunter showed us enough that he has that elite upside, or you can rank the guy on the chance that his value goes to almost zero. And those two things both exist with Hunter, don't they?
They absolutely do. And I've kind of been more on the bear side of Hunter throughout the process. Just knowing his background, he was a defensive back to start at Colorado, played a lot more on the defensive side. His offensive usage was a little bit more starting out as a cameo appearance, moving into his final season being a full-time receiver in addition to defensive back. But I think when you look at transitioning to the NFL, I mean, it would have been easier for him to be a full-time defensive back to sprinkle some offensive plays in than I think going the other direction. And then having Brian Thomas Jr. there last summer, now having Jacoby Myers, now having Parker Washington relative to what they have in the quarterback room, I think it's very, very valid to point out. I think overall, and especially from a fantasy lens, to get Travis Hunter to recognize the upside that we're hoping he would possess, you do need that commitment to be a full-time wide receiver, because it's just, to me, I think it's very, very difficult to game plan for a guy outside of being, we're going to get him the ball in this play intentionally, to work him into the game plan. And one of the things I think it was Matt Ryan was talking about last offseason of on the sidelines, so much adjustment happens throughout the game to have like that huddle that we see with the wide receivers and the quarterback sitting around and looking at the pictures. And then Travis Hunter's out over there running around to like trying to tackle a guy. It's just makes it very, very difficult to get high upside there, absent a massive commitment to being, we recognize the value of receiver is higher than the value of defensive back.
Yeah. It's we're going to keep some candles lit for Travis Hunter
Absolutely
becoming a full-time wide receiver. But it feels a little gross right now. Speaking of feeling a little gross, the Seattle running back situation felt a little gross for most of the year. And we've gone through this cycle, I think 2 years in a row now, where Zach Charbonnet is garbage. Why won't they give the ball to Ken Walker 20 times a game? Ken Walker misses a couple games. Zach Charbonnet is awesome. Why don't they give him the ball 20 times a year? Well, now Ken Walker is a free agent and Zach Charbonnet is going to miss at least a portion of next year, I would say. He was a faller, but I think it highlights how awful this range of running back is right now in Dynasty for me. He just fell from RB 29 to RB 32. It also highlights the fact that he just turned 25 years old. So it's not like this is going to take away all of his good years that he has left. He'll be 25 probably before he plays football again, or still when he plays football again. But with Charbonnet, do you see a guy who like could be a 20 touch or 17 touch or 15 touch per game guy and actually like an RB2 for a full season? Or should we have sold before the injury happened?
We probably should have sold before the injury happened, just because I think there was an awful lot of wish casting going on in terms of like wish casting, Kenneth Walker being off this team and Jack Charbonnet being the bell cow back there. And I do think that we do in fantasy football, we do this a little bit too much versus in real football. In fantasy football, like we only want a team to have one wide receiver and one running back, and we want everything to go there. And then I think in real football, the Seahawks are like, hey, it's nice to have two good running backs because we can have two good running backs. They both can play. If one gets hurt, at least we have one good running back. So I think we absolutely, when we're in those situations, and we've already talked about Breece Hall in this episode, but when we're wish casting something of the Breece Hall being the lead back for the Kansas City Chiefs, we probably should sell in those situations versus like just dealing with where the reality sits. There, I don't know. I just don't know that this injury, I'm not overly convinced this injury changes all that much in the outlook for the way that the Seahawks view Walker, because I think they do like having two good running backs. Their cap is in a pretty solid spot to be able to keep Walker around. It might change a little bit in them saying, we do like Walker. Maybe we wanted to franchise him for this year or transition tag him for this year to keep him around. Now they might be saying if Charbonnet is going to miss a massive chunk of the year, we think Walker's really, really good. Him being the lead back in this offense for a full season, we can't really play that year-to-year game anymore. We need to give him like a 3-year deal to lock him in because his value could be that much higher at a year from now at that point in time. But I think we started talking about Sam Darnold and looking at the way this team is structured to win games. Having two good running backs, I think, is a key component in leaning on that run game.
Yeah, I kind of expect there will be someone else sharing with Walker the first half of next year if that's how long Charbonnet is out, which leads to my next question. I've heard some people talking about Walker as a riser because of this injury. I don't really see it that way. He's right around RB 18, 19, 20 for me, and that's probably where he's going to stay. Do you think Walker should be a riser?
I don't know that he should be a riser in rankings. I've got him at 17 right now, and I feel like that's a pretty solid spot for him. But it's the Sam Laporta conversation of if Dynasty community is viewing him as a riser, then the market is going to rise on him. So it's this offseason game that we play of without having football. Both things are Schrodinger's cat. It's alive and it's dead. He's the star running back for the Seahawks. At the same time, they could have a committee, but right now we're excited because great performances in the playoffs.
Yeah, I would say he's a pretty good sell candidate right now, and maybe a great sell candidate if he signs a new contract. Because if he signs a 2 or 3 year deal, I think pushes up into that high end RB2 conversation. And that's not a bet that I want to make. I've got one more question, and he's not a faller for me at this time, but I've had a very complicated relationship with ranking Rashee Rice in Dynasty, and I currently don't know what to do with him. So where do you have Rashee Rice, and should we be reacting at all to the social media reports and apparent investigation into Rashee Rice?
I've got him at wide receiver 18. Which would is lower than where he would be without these recent reports. And I think it's less the reports coming out, and it's after the way last offseason went, you would think that he would have it's either going to be, he's suspended to start the year last year, the last trouble last year. You're either going to have these guys that are going to say, okay, like this is my career. I don't want to mess this up. And I need to get, especially a wide receiver, I need to get to that second contract at least to be able to really set myself up. Or you're going to have somebody that ends up in the social media report at the end of the year. And that really just makes you lose a lot of faith on that being a person that's going to figure it out over the long term. I think is just the biggest thing, because when you're in a significant car accident the way that he was, and then another incident comes up last off season, those are some come to Jesus moments, I think, in somebody's life. And so if nothing's going to change, then that's when you have to be a little bit realistic about the situation you're dealing with.
That's enough for my questions, but I know we had some questions in the chat. This is a fair question. Anyone worried about JSN if Kubiak leaves?
Not particularly, because I trust Sam Darnold to be able to get in the ball, and it's not like they're exactly banging down options of who else is going to throw it to.
You just said I trust Sam Darnold. Look at how far we've come. We trust Sam Darnold. I would say I don't worry about JSN as a top 10 wide receiver if Kubiak leaves. He is up to wide receiver 2 or 3 in most dynasty rankings, and I might have a little bit of concern about him being this efficient, especially because we know it's going to be a run-heavy offense, and you have to be this efficient to be this great. in this offense. How much should I be willing to pay for Genty? Will next year be the breakout, or does the line coaching still give you hesitation? We don't know who the coach is yet. I expect, Jeff, the line's going to be better. It can't be worse, right?
I mean, you're not going to have like I don't want to call it a nepo hire, but it was kind of a nepotism hire on the offensive line coach last year. I don't know that they were overly qualified at the offensive line coach, and that was a massive problem. I mean, Chip Kelly bouncing back and forth between college and NFL to be the offensive coordinator, and then having Pete Carroll kind of the influence there. There was just a lot going on with the Raiders coaching, so that should absolutely be better. The line was better before Jackson Powers Johnson got hurt. He'll be back, and so that'll help out. I would expect they would address it. Like to me, like Ashton Genty broke out. Like I just don't know about like I don't think people realize how good Ashton Genty was last year. And
so, a couple of guys that were a lot better but are older. Would you be happy to trade a Jonathan Taylor or a James Cook for Ashton Genty in Dynasty?
Absolutely. I would
100%. I would be too. I have him ahead of both those guys. He's my RB4 behind only Gibbs, Bijan, and Achane. And I think a lot of people have him ahead of Achane. So he's right in that same range for you, right? Okay.
Exactly.
This question makes no sense on the first part, but it does on the second part, so I'll still answer it. Someone who doesn't like CMC and wants to trade him, I could understand hating having a 30-year-old running back. I don't think we have to say we hate CMC, but would you take Breece Hall for Christian McCaffrey straight up?
I have Hall ranked above Christian McCaffrey in my dynasty rankings. So yes, the answer to that question would be yes. And it really just comes down to the game of, we know the cliff is coming for Christian McCaffrey. We're thankful we got this year. I think overall, when you look at McCaffrey, where the points came from, you could make the argument that the cliff came already because he was almost treated more as a slot receiver throughout the year. And a lot of struggle targets there in that 49ers offense that was missing pieces throughout the year. And so it's almost, it was a mirage this year, a little bit of his overall production.
So Jaquan sent in a brag and not a question, but I'm going to turn his brag into a question. Did a dynasty startup last year where I ended up with McBride, Warren, Fannin, Gadsden, and Mason Taylor. Awesome. I've got a couple of McBride Fannin teams, and I've been trying to decide if I should try to deal with one of them or just flex one of them. But if let's say that happened, and so you've got these 5 tight ends. Is there one of those that you think the market is maybe too high on that would be the right guy to trade? Or would you just see which one you could get more value for than you think they're worth?
I think the market, out of that group, the market might be too high on Rondé Gadsden. I think it's the guy that may be too high just because hypothetically, I think Ladd McConkey operates in somewhat of the similar areas of the field if you were to break it down. And I don't know that, I'm not really convinced Quentin Johnson's going away. I think they like him quite a bit there. And Trey Harris becoming established. To me, it's just the conversation of the overall ceiling. I see, especially like a Harold Fannin, but even Warren, people are putting Gadsden in the same tier as those types of players, especially with the hire of Mike McDaniel and seeing what he did with Jonnu Smith. I'm not there on Gadsden's value.
I might see also, because there were some serious Tyler Warren believers in the first half of last year, looked like they were entirely right. So I might see if you could find somebody in your league that thinks Tyler Warren's got a second round value in startup or something like that, and you're able to get an elite player at a different position and you still have McBride and Fannin, that would make some sense to me. But I agree with you on Gadsden. I think I'd probably take just a random second for him. 2027 second for Gadsden. You'd be pretty happy with that?
27, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
27 is where we're leaning there. Yep.
Yeah, we are firmly in the I don't want any 2026 seconds camp so far on this podcast. And this one may be just the quickest question we've ever answered. Any hope for Caleb Johnson year 2?
I do have hope for Caleb Johnson, a lot of, because it's just that the offensive structure wasn't built for Caleb Johnson. If Aaron Rodgers is going to be the quarterback, you're going to lean on this quick passing game. That's just not going to be the Caleb Johnson's game. And if you're looking at a different quarterback there, I really hope it's not Mason Rudolph. I hope that they get a little bit aggressive there. But I think when you look at the way you draft Caleb Johnson and you kind of build towards that traditional old school power Steelers run offense, and then you bring Aaron Rodgers in, and it's just a dramatic pivot towards Aaron Rodgers wanting a Kenneth Gainwell or Warren back there protecting him and utilizing him in the passing game. It's the pieces moved on the board after Caleb Johnson was selected, I think, on that Steelers offense.
So assuming if Rodgers comes back, the answer to this question is just flat out no.
If Rodgers comes back, then I'm leaning a little bit more toward. I don't think Aaron Rodgers wants to be in the same backfield as Caleb Johnson. Is what it comes down to.
That is exactly the impression I had as well. And we will finish with a question from C Green. And is C Green with an A, not an E? Is that the color of the Seahawks? Maybe, I'm not sure. Anyway, one of the colors of their 17 different uniforms. Anyways, Jared Goff. Is Jared Goff undervalued? He remains a top 10 QB that no one talks about.
I hesitate to say that he's undervalued just because I hesitate to buy in on consistency for non-mobile quarterbacks, because you're really looking at the passing volume and really the touchdown volume staying up there. And early in the season, the touchdown volume wasn't there for Goff. He got there a little bit later in the season to be able to rely there. I just don't like to. These guys that are outside of maybe a Joe Burrow are like, I don't know. I think that you're dealing with a lot of fire there because you get it easily could be that 20 touchdown, 3,800 yard year for Goff. And you're like, this guy's quarterback 21. What am I going to do with this guy?
No, I think that's the kind of the way that I've got him at QB 17 right now for dynasty purposes, which seems too low. I understand, but I'd rather have Dak. And that's he's now become kind of the same type of guy. He doesn't run as much. I do have Goff a little bit ahead of Baker just because I'm afraid that the fall off we saw from Baker was him returning to. He's had such an up and down. And I think it'll be the same way with Darnold next year. If he has a bad month, everybody's going to be afraid. Oh no, he's back. So that's kind of the way that it works with those guys. And maybe it would take 6 weeks for us to feel that way of Goff. So he's a little bit more insulated, but probably not a lot. That's going to do it for FFT Dynasty. Jeff, awesome stuff. Tell everybody again one more time about the rookie draft guide you have coming up.
Yeah, we have the rookie guide coming out for football guys. We usually do 3 versions of that rookie guide. We'll be releasing version 1 very soon. We have about 150 players right now in the pipeline that we're going to have ranked and have profiles for that. Version 2 usually drops right after the combine. We update all the athletic testing for every player that participates in the combine and kind of start to keep our ear towards the ground with some of these pro days coming out. And then version 3 is a post-draft version that we do where we really get version 1 is almost building the dictionary of the rookies, more or less, of like telling you who these players are, where they kind of headed, what their background is. And then by the time we get to version 3, we're really breaking down the fantasy angles of that, the depth chart that they landed in and immediate production, those types of things. And so it's a massive undertaking that we do throughout the offseason. And like I said, we're tracking to about 150 players that should be released here in the coming weeks.
Awesome stuff. You guys, I've told you this a lot of times, but it's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast on was to bring people like Jeff on, highlight great work that's happening around the community so you guys can go access that work and be better dynasty fantasy football players. So go check that out as soon as it comes out. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Emma. Thank you to everybody who was active in the chat. We will talk to you on Friday.